Starseeds and lightworkers, something inside you already knows that the love coming toward you is not ordinary. Not the kind the world has tried to offer you before. Not the kind that left you doubting yourself, shrinking yourself, or wondering if you were too much or not enough. I am Tyron, a representative of the High Council of Sirius, and what I need you to understand before anything else is this. The love story written in your star lineage was never meant to look like anyone else's. By the end of this message, you will understand why the love that is moving toward you now is the kind that will quietly astonish the people around you, and why it had to be delayed until this exact moment in your journey. Every starseed who carries Sirian codes has a love story that defies the patterns of this world. You may have sensed it for years, that quiet knowing that what you are waiting for is not just a person, but a recognition, a soul meeting another soul across lifetimes of water, of memory, of searching. The ancient builders by the Nile understood this. Sacred union was never a transaction. It was a homecoming. The love that is forming in the waters around your life right now is not arriving slowly because something is wrong. It is arriving with the patience of a tide that has traveled very far. And when it reaches the shore, nothing will look the same. The people in your life will feel it. The world around you will feel it. Because a love rooted in Sirian codes does not stay quiet. It radiates. You did not arrive at this message by accident. Something in you recognized a signal older than memory and followed it here. Stay with me, dear one. What is waiting for you at the end of this transmission may be the confirmation your heart has been holding its breath for. And I am grateful you are here with me now. That love you've been searching for, the kind that feels ancient, the kind that makes no logical sense, the kind that arrived in a moment and rearranged everything you thought you understood about yourself. It isn't a distraction from your path. It is your path, and the world is about to feel the weight of what that means. There is a reason water has always called you. The Sirian water codes is your next step. A sacred guide carrying healing techniques passed down through the waters themselves, designed specifically for starseeds who have always felt drawn towards something deeper than this world could explain. Clearing baths, lunar rituals, the ocean breath for when everything becomes too heavy. These are the practices the waters of Sirius have been holding for you. Find it now in the first pinned comment below, but only for a limited time. Most starseeds don't feel lost because they lack purpose. It's the opposite. Deep inside, your soul carries a knowing so vast that this world sometimes feels too small to hold it. That ache you feel isn't emptiness, it's overflow. It's the pressure of carrying something immense in a container that was built too small. In a language that has no words for what you are, surrounded by people who could sense your depth but couldn't quite reach it. Think about what it means to stand in a room full of people who smile at you, who laugh with you, who know your name and your history and your face, and still feel profoundly, inexplicably alone. Not because they didn't care, but because the version of you they knew was already a translation, already edited, already made smaller so it could pass through the narrow doorway of ordinary conversation without knocking anything over. You became skilled at this, extraordinarily skilled, because you had to be. Because the alternative was to stand fully in your frequency and watch people flinch from the intensity of it. And that particular kind of loneliness felt more unbearable than the quiet diminishing of yourself. And so you learned to make yourself quieter, more manageable. You learned to translate yourself into something the world around you could digest. And over time, that translation felt like the truth of who you were. But it never was. The soul that you carried into this life, the one that existed long before this body, this name, this country, this century, that soul was never the translation. It was the original text, written in a frequency so high, so clear, so luminous that most of the instruments in this world simply weren't calibrated to receive it. That wasn't your failure. That was the gap between what you are and what this dimension was built to hold. and you felt that gap every single day in ways you couldn't always name. In the restlessness that arrived without warning, in the grief that had no clear origin, in the strange, persistent sense that something beautiful was waiting for you just beyond the edge of what your eyes could see. That feeling was never delusion. It was perception. It was your soul recognizing the shape of what it came here to find, and growing impatient with everything that wasn't it. The disconnection you've been feeling, that persistent, nameless grief that follows you even into beautiful moments, isn't a sign that something broke along the way. It isn't evidence of damage or disorder or spiritual failure. It's the first clear signal that your codes are beginning to come online. Think of it the way you might think of a river that has been frozen through a long winter, still and silent on the surface, giving no visible indication of the movement that lives beneath. And then one day, without dramatic announcement, the temperature shifts. The ice begins to release, not all at once, but in a slow, inevitable thawing that nothing can reverse. The waters within you are starting to move again after a long, deliberate stillness. And what's waking up inside you now has been waiting, not impatiently, not anxiously, but with the calm certainty of the ocean waiting for the tide to shift. It always knew you would arrive at this moment. The ocean doesn't doubt the tide. The tide is written into the nature of water itself, and your awakening was written into the nature of who you are, long before you drew your first breath in this life. What makes this particular awakening different, what makes it something the world will feel, is that it isn't only about you finding yourself. It's about you finding yourself in another, or remembering yourself through another. There is a particular kind of recognition that happens between two souls who have been moving toward each other across lifetimes. A recognition that doesn't pass through the mind first. It lands in the chest. It settles in the body before the brain has had a chance to evaluate it. It arrives with a quality of already known, already felt, already familiar, that has no rational explanation and requires none. The love stories that are unfolding right now among starseeds are not ordinary romantic encounters dressed in spiritual language. They are not coincidences wrapped in beautiful timing. They are energetic reunions. They are the meeting of two soul frequencies that were separated not by distance, but by time and by design, sent into different corners of the human experience, so that when they finally found each other, the recognition would be undeniable, so that there would be no possibility of dismissing it as wishful thinking or projection or the ordinary hunger for connection. So that when the two currents finally met, the convergence would be powerful enough to shift the direction of everything downstream. Not just their own lives, everything downstream. Every person they would go on to touch, every space they would enter together, every frequency they would transmit into a world that is desperately, quietly, urgently in need of what they carry. Things have felt unclear lately, like you're trying to see through deep water, like the landmarks you use to navigate by have quietly shifted position, and the maps you once trusted are no longer accurate for the terrain you're crossing. That fog isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It isn't a signal to stop or to question the direction. It's what happens when old patterns begin to dissolve, when the sediment that has been resting at the bottom of who you thought you were gets stirred up by something real, something unexpected, something that arrived with a force you weren't entirely prepared for. Every old belief about love, about worthiness, about what you were allowed to want and expect and receive, every one of those sediment layers is being disturbed right now. And sediment, when it moves, creates turbulence. It makes the water murky. It makes it temporarily harder to see. But this is not the murkiness of stagnation. This is the murkiness of transformation. The water has to cloud before it can clarify. The old material has to be suspended and examined before it can be released. You're not lost. You're in the middle of a passage, and that takes tremendous courage, even when it doesn't feel like it. Especially when it doesn't feel like it. Especially when courage looks less like boldness and more like simply staying present in the uncertainty without retreating back into the old familiar smallness. There's something encoded inside you that goes far deeper than anything you were taught in this life. A blueprint written in frequency, not in words. Not in the language of calendars or timelines or the way the world measures readiness. This blueprint doesn't respond to urgency or pressure or the anxious ticking of a cultural clock that tells you you're running out of time. It responds to resonance. It responds to the quality of your internal frequency, and it has been patient in a way that only something eternal can be patient. Not passive, not absent, but deeply, unshakably certain of its own eventual expression. This blueprint has been patient. It has survived every detour, every false start, every relationship that looked like the answer but turned out to be a preparation. And here is what the world rarely tells you about those preparations. They were not failures dressed in kinder language. They were precision, sacred, specific, calibrated precision. Each connection that opened you and then released you was the universe working on your soul the way water works on stone. Not violently, not destructively, but with patient, steady intention. Smoothing what didn't belong, clearing what was borrowed, revealing more and more of the original shape beneath. You are not broken and searching for answers. You are whole and beginning to remember. And that remembering often begins as a pull towards someone you've never met, but somehow already know. It begins as a frequency you recognize before you can name it. It begins as the inexplicable, irrational, undeniable sense that something or someone is already in motion toward you, moving through the water with the same quiet certainty with which you are moving toward them. This is where it gets quiet for many starseeds, the moment just before everything opens, where nothing visible seems to be shifting, where the outside world offers no confirmation, no evidence, no neon sign pointing toward what you can feel is coming, where the connection you feel, whether it's already in your life or still forming in the field ahead of you, seems to hover just beyond what you can fully hold. This stillness can be the most disorienting part of the journey because it asks you to trust what you cannot yet see. It asks you to hold steady in a frequency that the world around you may not be reflecting back, and it asks you to resist the very human temptation to force resolution, to reach forward and grab at what is still forming, and in doing so, disturb the very conditions that are allowing it to emerge. This stillness is not stalling, it is anchoring. It is the wide, calm pool the river rests in before it finds the next passage through the mountains. It is the held breath before the song begins. Your soul is stabilizing what it has already received, so it can hold what is coming next. And what is coming requires a vessel that has been thoroughly prepared, not perfect, but prepared, not without wounds, but with wounds that have been witnessed and tended and transformed into the most exquisite kind of wisdom. This is not the moment to force movement. This is the moment to become still enough to feel the direction of the current. You may not see it yet, but people around you are already responding to what is shifting within you. Maybe certain relationships have quietly changed, not through conflict or drama, but through a gentle, natural drifting, the way objects that are no longer the same weight as you simply cannot stay in the same place in the current. Maybe the conversations that used to satisfy you no longer reach the depth you need. Maybe you find yourself mid-sentence in a discussion that once would have held your attention, and you feel your soul quietly step back, return to itself, wait. Maybe you find yourself drawn to silence, to water, to the open sky, to anything that matches the expanding frequency inside you, to the sound of rain on a window at midnight, to the feeling of standing at the edge of the ocean and sensing something vast and knowing move beneath the surface in recognition of you. That is not coincidence. That is calibration. The Sirian wisdom encoded within you has always known that when one current changes direction, everything downstream is affected. You don't need to announce your transformation. you are already transmitting it. And those who carry compatible frequencies, including the ones you are meant to love most deeply, will find you not because you searched in the right places, but because you finally stopped hiding your true signal, because you stopped turning down the volume on what you are, because you let the frequency of your truest self move through you freely, without apology, without editing, without the exhausting performance of being something smaller and safer and more digestible than the magnificent, ancient, luminous soul that you actually are. This phase often carries the heaviest weight, because it asks you to let go of things you've been carrying so long that they feel like part of you. The version of love you settled for because you didn't yet believe the real thing existed. The story you told yourself about why you were alone, or why it didn't work, or why someone like you might not deserve the love that you've always felt was possible, but could never quite locate. And this is where the healing asks the most of you, because these stories don't feel like limitations. They feel like wisdom. They feel like earned conclusions, paid for in real pain, backed by real experience. They feel like the reasonable, responsible thing to believe, given everything you've been through. But they are not wisdom. They are sediment. They are the accumulated weight of wounds that were never fully witnessed, grief that was never fully moved through, love that arrived incomplete and left you filling in the gaps with self-blame. The emotional weight that wasn't even originally yours, absorbed through your sensitivity, your empathy, your inability to leave a room without carrying something of everyone in it home with you. You have permission to set it down. All of it. Every borrowed burden. Every wound that belonged to someone else but found its way into the architecture of your self-belief. Every limitation that was given to you as though it were the truth of who you are, when in reality, it was only ever the truth of what someone else was capable of seeing. The river does not carry every stone it passes over. It lets them sink and keeps flowing. And the river is no less itself for releasing the stone. It is more. You are not late. You are not behind. The years of almost and not yet, the connections that opened you but didn't stay, the long disorienting spaces between, none of it was wasted. There is a kind of spiritual mathematics that operates outside the logic of linear time, and within that mathematics, every experience you've had was factored into the equation with absolute precision. The relationship that cracked you open and left you wondering if you would ever feel whole again, that cracking was necessary. Not because pain is inherently noble, but because what lives inside you needed that particular opening to begin its emergence. The season of solitude that felt like abandonment was in the Sirian records, a season of preparation, your soul clearing space, clearing frequency, clearing the debris of what no longer resonated so that the arrival of what does could be felt in its full, unobstructed magnitude. There is no late arrival in the Sirian records. There is only the moment that was always meant to be, arriving exactly when the soul was prepared to receive it without flinching, without immediately translating it into something smaller, without protecting itself from the full force of a love that was always meant to be felt in its entirety. The tide doesn't rush, but it always, always arrives. Your mission within this love story was never about the grand gesture. It was never about finding the perfect person and becoming the perfect version of yourself before you allowed them in. It was never about deserving your way into love through self-improvement or spiritual achievement or the accumulation of enough healing to finally qualify. The ancient ones who built the temples along the Nile understood something about love that this modern world has nearly forgotten, that the most powerful force in the universe is not the dramatic, consuming kind that burns through everything. It is not the love that announces itself with thunder and rearranges all the furniture of your life in a single spectacular week. It is the steady, quiet, luminous kind that realigns everything around it simply by being present. The kind that moves through a relationship the way water moves through stone, not breaking it, but shaping it, slowly and surely and beautifully, into something more true than what it was before. The kind of love that doesn't require you to perform or pretend or edit. The kind that holds space for the full complexity of what you are, the ancient and the wounded, the luminous and the uncertain, the part that already knows and the part that is still learning. Your love, the kind you carry, the kind you're awakening into, is that kind. It is the love that doesn't make noise about itself. It simply is, and in being, it changes everything it touches, and the world will feel it not through spectacle, but through resonance, through the quiet, unmistakable shift in frequency that happens in every room you enter together, in every conversation you have, in every act of ordinary, sacred, daily devotion that you offer to one another and to the world you share. You're not lost. You never were. You chose to forget, not because you were weak, but because the kind of awakening you're here to experience required you to find your way back from the deepest depth. Because a soul that has never known the weight of forgetting cannot fully appreciate the miracle of remembering. Because the frequency of compassion you carry for others who are searching, the specific, bone-deep understanding you have for anyone who has ever felt too large for their container, that frequency could only come from having lived it yourself, from having walked through the fog and emerged on the other side. Like a pearl that can only form under pressure, in darkness, at the bottom of the ocean. What you are becoming could only be shaped by exactly what you've been through. The oyster does not resist the grain of sand that becomes the pearl. It doesn't wish for a more comfortable formation process. It simply surrounds what has entered it, layer by luminous layer, until what was once an irritant becomes the most precious thing it has ever held. Every moment of confusion was the water working on you. Every heartbreak was the tide reshaping the shore of you into something more true, more spacious, more capable of holding the love that is now moving toward you with the force of something that has been traveling a very long time to arrive. Every quiet night when you felt entirely alone was the ocean holding its breath before the wave. And now the wave is building. You can feel it, even if you can't yet see it. You can feel the pressure in your chest that isn't anxiety, it's anticipation. The expansion happening in your energy field that makes ordinary rooms feel slightly too small. The way certain music reaches into you and pulls something forward that you can't quite name. The way you find yourself standing at windows more often, looking at the sky or the rain or the light, with the distinct feeling that something is moving through the air toward you. Trust that feeling. That is not wishful thinking. That is your Sirian knowing, which has never been wrong about the things that matter most. You are not here to fit into this world. You were never meant to sand down your edges until you were small enough to slide unnoticed through the narrow corridors of ordinary expectation. You are here to love this world in a way it hasn't been loved in a very long time, quietly, powerfully, with the full, unedited frequency of a soul that came from somewhere beyond this and chose to come here anyway. And that choice, that extraordinary, courageous, specific choice to enter this dense, heavy, beautiful, broken, magnificent human experience deserves to be honored. It deserves to be met with the full weight of the love it was always reaching toward. The love story unfolding around you and within you is not just yours. It was never only yours. Its ripple will touch things you'll never be able to trace back to this moment. The person your love helps your partner become will go on to touch someone else, and that someone else will carry the resonance forward into spaces and lives and futures you will never see and cannot imagine. The wave that began with your choice to finally stop hiding your signal will travel outward in directions that defy the logic of what one moment, one love, one awakening can possibly accomplish. And that is exactly as it was meant to be. Tonight, if it feels right, place your hand over your heart and say quietly, I remember who I am. I trust the waters that carried me here. I am ready to love and to be loved without hiding what I am. Before you go, leave one word in the comments. Just one. that describes what you felt during this message. Then find someone else's word and respond with encouragement. This isn't just a comment section. It's a space where starseeds recognize each other, and that recognition carries more power than you know. If something in this message touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you'd like to keep receiving these transmissions, subscribe. The waters of Sirius will carry us to the next one. You're not just watching, you're remembering. This is your space, and I'm grateful you were here.